You may be wondering how to answer plot element questions. In this video, I will work through example questions using a four-step reading strategy. Angela here from Custom Classroom, helping make test prep simple. Let's quickly review what are plot elements. First, the story will begin with the exposition. This is where the characters and the setting are introduced. Next comes the rising action, where the problem or conflict is developed through a series of events. Then the climax, which is the most intense point in the story. It can also be the turning point in the story. After that, the falling action is when the problem is beginning to get solved. And finally, the resolution, where the conflict is completely solved and the story comes to an end. To work through these questions, I like to use my four-step reading strategy. I've made another video about this STAR strategy. It is scan, target text, actively read, and respond. Now let's work through a few plot element questions. Step one is to scan the question. Is the question a whole question requiring information from throughout the entire passage, or is it a part question where students will need to return to only one section of the text? Now let's look at the first question. How does the story's setting influence its plot? Well, this is a whole question where we'll need to look at the entire text. Next question is, why is the description of the time machine important to the plot? Again, this is a whole question where we need to return to all the text to figure this out. The final question is, what can you infer about the characters and how they are shaped by the setting? This is also a whole question. So let's move on to the next step, which is step two, target the text, where we're going to carefully read the passage. And this passage is an excerpt from The Time Machine. Would you like to see the time machine itself? Asked the time traveler. And therewith, taking the lamp in his hand, he led the way down the long, drafty corridor to his laboratory. I remember vividly the flickering light, his weird broad head in silhouette, the dance of the shadows. How we all followed him, puzzled but incredulous, and how there in the laboratory we beheld a larger edition of the little mechanism, which we had seen vanish from before our eyes. Part were of nickel, parts of ivory, parts had certainly been filled or sawn out of rock crystal. The thing was generally complete, but the twisted crystalline bars lay unfinished upon the bench beside some sheets of drawings, and I took one up for a better look at it. Quartz it seemed to be. Look here, said the medical man. Are you perfectly serious, or is this a trick like that ghost you showed us last Christmas? Upon that machine, said the time traveler, holding the lamp aloft, I intend to explore time. Is that plain? I was never more serious in my life. None of us quite knew how to take it. I caught Philby's eyes over the shoulder of the medical man, and he winked at me solemnly. Now that we have read the entire passage, we know that this is a fictional passage about the time traveler and this time travel machine. So we can move on to step three, which is to actively read. This is where I would have students go back and reread and think about setting, characters, problem, and solution. So I'm going to go ahead and just go over these. So the setting is very descriptive in here. It is about this dark and kind of shadowy lab. The characters are the narrator, the time traveler, the medical man, and Philby. The problem is that the characters are really trying to figure out if all of this is real. Is the time traveler serious that he made this machine that can actually travel through time? And in our case here, solution hasn't happened yet. Since the passage is just an excerpt from the story, we don't actually find out if this machine is real or not. All right, on to step four, which is respond to questions. So here we'll start with question one, since all the questions are whole questions. How does the story setting influence its plot? Well, let's look at answer choice A. The darkness of the room emphasizes the seriousness of the machine. Well, this is not correct. The lab is dark and the time traveler is serious, but these do not really go that well together. The characters learn more that he is serious due to his actions and how he talks versus the room actually being dark. All right, answer choice B. The shadows mirror the character's uncertainty. Well, this sounds really good. The description of the lab talks about all the shadows dancing around, but they follow him feeling puzzled, incredulous, which means hard to believe. So that seems to mirror the feelings of the characters. All right, answer choice C. The flickering light shows the possibilities. Well, this is incorrect. Yes, there is lights that are flickering, but there's no feeling of possibility throughout this passage, only really uncertainty. Answer choice D. The drafty corridor forces the characters to follow the time traveler. This is also incorrect. Yes, the hall is drafty, but the characters are following him because they are curious to learn more, not because of this specific setting. All right, let's look at question 2. Why is the description of the time machine important to the plot? All right, so for this, I would really like to look back and reread this description so I have it in the front of my mind. Parts were of nickel, parts of ivory, parts had certainly been filled or sawn out of rock crystal. The thing was generally complete, but the twisted crystalline bars laid unfinished upon the bench beside some sheets of drawings. Okay, so let's look back at the answer choices now. A, it describes what the machine looks like. So we're trying to see why this description is important to plot. Well, okay, so A is not correct. It does describe what the machine looks like, but this doesn't really talk at all about how this is important to the plot. B, it reveals how unique the machine is. Okay, that's also not a great answer. Yes, the machine is unique since we can all infer that none of the characters have seen anything like it before, but that does not go with the overall feeling of uncertainty in this specific passage. All right, C, it shows the machine is unfinished. Well, this sounds pretty good because just picture the characters are walking into this lab. They already feel unsure about the time machine. And now there's this description that highlights how the machine is unfinished. It really kind of drives the point home about this uncertainty of whether they actually believe him or not. And then let's look at D. It lists what needs to be completed. Well, that's not correct. There is a sheet of a drawing, but there's not really a list of what still needs to be added. All right, now for our final question. What can you infer about the characters and how they are shaped by the setting? So this is a much more complex question. So we'll really need to refer to the text so we can answer this. So first, let's look specifically at setting. So here we've got the drafty corridor in the laboratory, the flickering lights, the weird silhouette, and all these shadows. Okay, now let's think about the characters and how they're feeling. They're feeling kind of puzzled, incredulous, which is basically not believing, and they're asking if he's actually serious or not. So using this evidence from the text, here's a possible answer. Based on details in the passage, I can infer that the setting adds to the characters' feelings of doubt and uncertainty. In the beginning, they feel puzzled, and in the end, they question if the time traveler is serious. Pair this with the drafty hall, weird silhouette, and dancing shadows. This setting seems to reinforce their inability to believe the machine is real. If you're looking to have more practice with plot elements, you can check out my task cards in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. I hope you found this video helpful. Check out my playlist to learn more about answering reading skills questions.